I want to turn to just the overall feel you have for Tennessee compared to the elite team, I believe, in the SEC right now, which is Georgia. When you look at those two football teams, how different or how far is the talent gap compared to where it's been the previous couple of years?
It's hard for me to sit back and say there is much of a difference. I think the difference really is at the quarterback spot with just experience. Like Carson Beck is heading into his second season. He's 23 years old. He's been an assistant for 5 years. He's been in the playoffs. He's been in Atlanta in the SEC championship game. So like he's experienced a lot of things that Nico most likely is going to experience this year and next year. And I doubt he stays for another year after that just because how talented he is. It's like he'll get there, no doubt about it. It's like that's the difference. But like running back wise, Tennessee feels very much similar to Georgia. Receiver wise, maybe even give the edge to Tennessee when it comes to receivers. Offensive line, I think the both are like I said earlier, like Tennessee's a top 3 or 4 offensive lines. Like they're pretty close there. Defensive line, probably give the edge to Tennessee. And Georgia's right there too. I mean, two of probably the best defense lines in the country. Secondary, probably Georgia a little bit, especially with Malachi back there. But like, really, you go position by position. They're both in the tops in the SEC at their respective positions, and I would say offense and defense as well. So like the kicker is just experience at quarterback. So like that, you'll feel more and more comfortable with Nico when it comes to comparing him to Carson. The minute that he steps foot out of that, the game against Oklahoma. And then the game against Alabama. Like if he looks great against those two teams, one on the road and then one at home, all of a sudden you're saying, okay, that game in Athens in November is going to be a pretty damn good football game.
So Aaron, specifically nailing this down because I think that's something that's shocking all of us, and you said it too, so it's shocking us more, is you didn't mention the trenches when you talked about the talent gap with Tennessee and Georgia, which nobody would have predicted at the beginning of the year.
Yep.
How close is this Tennessee defensive line to Georgia's defensive line?
Well, I think they're just as talented. I mean, they're just as talented, if not as talented. I mean, you have the best defensive end in the country rushing on the outside. You got Big O there as well, the defensive tackle position. You may not have the depth. And I think that's where Georgia separates themselves from a lot of teams. And that's where the elite teams do kind of take that next step is, Tennessee's really good. And like, I don't know, just to be honest, like, I don't know their backup situation as well as maybe like I know Georgia's backup situation. I kind of know the starters on both sides for UT, but like what Georgia has done well in years past is like, if number one goes down, guess what? We have a 5-star backing them up. So like, we're good to go right after that. And as Tennessee has built a really good starting roster, do they have the depth? You look at Alabama the other day, and you would think Alabama would be fine too, but Alabama lost 2 offensive linemen for the first part of the season. Their O-line looked horrendous versus USF last week. Mm-hmm. If Alabama played that game with those offensive linemen, say this week versus Wisconsin or against Tennessee, they would get whipped. So like they don't have the depth at offensive line all of a sudden right now, which is kind of weird to think about. So does Tennessee's depth allow them to maybe have a couple injuries or rotate effectively later on the season, especially in a longer football season with the playoffs, to be able to allow them to be just as competitive as they are right now?
ESPN commentator Aaron Murray, nice enough to join us. And if you haven't checked out his Snaps podcast, you need to do that. Slightly changing gears just a little bit. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked about somebody else when you were like 14 years old. And that was, when is Nick Saban going to have enough? And I'll ask you that about Kirby Smart. I mean, what motivates him after multiple championships to keep rolling? Can you see him being a long-term guy? Because on the outside looking in, he looks like a burnout guy.
Yeah, Kirby is all gas, no break. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he wants to be involved with every aspect of that football team, from the recruiting, who's going to be on campus, to the transfer portal, to what's probably being served for lunch there at the Buttsmere facility for the football players. Like, he has his hand in every little piece of it. And it was interesting. I was actually at Ole Miss this past weekend, and I sat down. They have a GM. I don't know if Tennessee has a GM or not for their football team, but just talking with their GM about what's the next phase of college football going to look like, and the role of having this general manager that's in charge of dealing out the money. We're going to get to a spot, whether it's next year or the year after that, where these players, there's going to be a salary cap. The money's going to be coming from the NCAA. Each team, I think, is going to get between probably $16 to $20 million a year. And that GM is going to be responsible for saying, okay, this is who we're going to target in either the transfer portal or high school recruiting. This is my budget. And, we're going to present a plan to the coaching staff of this is who we think, and this is how the money is going to be allocated. So I think some of that is hopefully going to take a lot of pressure off these coaches. But they have to be willing to give it up. And some coaches are going to be willing to say, listen, I trust my GM to take on that role. And yes, I'm still going to watch and study the tape and, interact with these recruits and these kids through the portal. But like, that is his job. My job is more focused on the current team. His is how to build the roster going forward. So I think it's healthy for these coaches to have someone like that. Because like you said, if you don't, eventually it's just too much is going on. And you're going to burn out with the direction of college football at the moment.
Great point. Caleb, I know you got one more go, and then we're going to let you out of here, Aaron. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, sorry, Aaron. Just one more question. But is that, speaking of Kirby Smart, is that actually, when we get back to Tennessee, one big difference between Tennessee and Georgia, I would say, and I want to know your thoughts. Tennessee uses its defensive line to make things easier on its secondary. But doesn't it feel like Georgia, their secondary could guard any receivers in the country and wouldn't even need pressure from the front to do it? They could just hang with them the whole time down the field, because that's what it feels like they could do.
Yeah, a little bit. They're young. They're young at the secondary. They lost 3 guys to the NFL last year who I thought were really, really talented. And obviously they replace it with 4 and 5 star guys that are probably just as talented, but they're just really green. It's good to see. Malachi Starks making plays against Clemson, and the interception was super sexy. But they had the Bolden kid, who's a true freshman, playing a lot of snaps. Very talented. Maybe Georgia gets lucky and he's as good as Alabama's freshman safety, who's now at Ohio State this year. Maybe he's that talented that can play early and be that effective. But yeah, like, they're really good. They're just really green. I still think Georgia would rather be more the Tennessee mindset a little bit of, hey, we have a really good front seven. I think they have a couple guys that are going to be somewhere in the first and second round, and their front 4 and linebacker position. We would rather dictate the game through those guys and alleviate some of that pressure on the back end.
Aaron Murray, fantastic. Again, tell us about Snaps. People need to check that out. You guys have a good time.
Yeah, just go to Snaps CFB on YouTube, socials, and wherever you get your podcast. Me and T-Bob. Every single day we'll be back about 40 minutes from now, live on YouTube. So come hang out with us.
But it means a lot. I appreciate the time and enjoy the season. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.